The sponsor of my stream and podcast is DistroKid. If you want 10% off on your first subscription with DistroKid, release your music to the world on every major music platform. Make sure to go to my website, andrewvanzark.com, and click on the discount link under the tab of DistroKid.
You don't know the power of the dark side.
Welcome to the Andrew Van Zark podcast.
Now you're listening with power. All right. Welcome to the Andrew Van Zark podcast here on the Planet X radio station, where we discuss Star Wars related content, whether it is video games, comics, manga, music, and the lore itself, and also Disney park related stuff. So it is a thing. So today we're going to talk about from NES to PS4, Supr Star Wars. Does it still hold up? Let's find out. Now you're listening with power. The sponsor of my stream and podcast is DistroKid. If you want 10% off on your first subscription with DistroKid, release your music to the world on every major music platform. Make sure to go to my website, andrewvanzark.com, and click on the discount link under the tab of DistroKid. In my opinion, it does hold up when it comes to the game itself. There is a few things that I love, and there's a few things that I could say are bad. Like every game has their pros and cons. There's no such thing as a perfect game, you know? Because even if the game is flawless and awesome and there's no complaint out of it, there's always something you could have changed or would have not done as a programmer or the developer of the game, you know? So I'm gonna read an article here from Jim Hargarivs. And from there, I'm going to also give my opinions in between. Before we start reading, I'm going to say that this was and is one of my most nostalgic video games I've ever played. I remember as a kid turning it on and hearing the Star Wars intro and then seeing Luke walking through Tatooine. And for some reason, you gotta fight fucking scorpions and jumping alien shit. And I'm like, where the hell do we see scorpions on the Star Wars franchise? Beats me into a whole degree of levels, you know? Let's start here reading the article. So, as one of the very first video games I ever played, there was an inevitable pang of nostalgia when launching Supr Star Wars on PlayStation 4. You know, there's a lot of things on PlayStation 4 that they changed, or better said, added, intro sequences, and some sort of additions that the game should have had in the beginning. For example, save. You should have been able to save on the original Supr Star Wars. You know, there used to be batteries, and it wasn't until the original Zelda game that we started having batteries on video games so we could save our progress. But I highly doubt we would have been able to save the same way that we save the game now in the PlayStation 4, you know? Because we can save in between the game, not like how it was back in the day, where you would save, like, your progress itself, not, like, in between. It wasn't until disc era of video games, and I think Nintendo 64, where we could actually microsave. And what I mean by microsaving, this is what I call microsaving, when you can save in the middle of a stage. So before Sony, Disney, or whoever came up with the idea to emulate this Super Nintendo favorite, the last time I had played it was almost 2 decades ago, marking one of my earliest encounters with a game console. Obviously, this was a very different time in my life, where entertainment technology was only starting to find a foothold in the family home. Same here. In my house, most of the technology that we had was mostly the traditional thing, you know, radios, TVs, audio systems to listen to, cassettes, and CDs, CD players, like early forms of CD players. We had some shape or form of 90s computers in my house. I remember having Windows 93 and 95. We were starting to have technology, and then my grandpa had also a Super Nintendo. I had a Super Nintendo My cousin had the Mega Drive. I didn't own a Mega Drive myself, but I did own a few Sega consoles like the Game Gear and the Dreamcast. I did have my fair share of Sega before Nintendo acquired Sega as a software developer, because as a hardware developer they flunked down. So it is a thing. We were starting to get technology in the house in terms of, you know, the really intricate software technology, because anything in the world can be called technology, you know? Even green spaces can be called technology. So technology is a really vast thing. It's just a device that can help you do a task or fulfill something, you know? That's what I call technology, you know? It's a method that has a certain pattern that makes you fulfill that task, whether it is digitally or 100% analog or 100% mechanical. It's mechanical is still technology. You know, gears and wires are still, for me, technology. So, continue reading here the article. Having brought up to the trio of Star Wars VHS tapes, naturally I was drawn towards Lucas' art, 16-bit adaptation of the original movie. Looking back at the early 90s, majority of games were fairly brutal back then, with many of the things we now take for granted simply absent. Instead, gamers would have to rely on a plethora of tricks, workarounds, and sidesteps, the lack of checkpoints, save systems, and many other helping hands we barely notice nowadays. That's the thing, you know? Back then, not every game had save states, because, you know, it could have been because of memory, because back then things were kilobytes or megabytes. Some games could not, for the way they were programmed and the way they were soldered and whatnot, they couldn't have the battery thing. And some games didn't have the battery because they were before the generation of the batteries. That's a new addition that they added to the PS4 version. I'm gonna now give my opinion. So from SNES to PS4, does it still hold up? In my opinion, I think it does hold up. It's a fairly awesome game. It does have its flaws. Like, for example, here's a flaw that I found out because it makes my hands hurt when I play it. And it's the fact that when you have to super jump to a further platform, you literally have to hold up, jump, and then go forward. And that's a really annoying mechanic. And I don't know why they programmed it that way. Many other platformers from the 90s that you just tap and you're super jumping. But here you gotta go up, jump, forward. It's like a huge mechanical task that you have to do, and it ends up hurting my thumb so much because I have to like hold the up and then at the same time go forward. So I gotta do this weird motion with my thumb, and it just ends up hurting it after the 100th time I'm done it. And that's a flaw that I see in the mechanics. Another flaw that I see for casual players. This is just for casual players. I'm not talking about the hardcore extremist. I'm talking about the casual player. Even on the easy mode of the game, it's still fairly difficult, you know? Specifically on the bosses. Even if you're using the strongest character, it's still completely difficult. I'm in the area where I have to save Princess Leia. I'm still on the boss there. I save state there. I am on that section of the game, and I'm struggling so bad, and I'm glad I'm trying it out this way, because if I would have stuck to my original cartridge, which I still own, I would have never gone further than the third stage, because I find it so difficult. Once after you get inside the sandcrawler, that's, for me, completely difficult, because not having the save states on the section where you have to like slide through the green lasers, that is so difficult because you gotta like slide a few times until it just actually slides through. So I don't know how do you do that without getting hit, and sometimes I've died from those lasers, so I would have not been able to go through it without the fucking save state. So yeah, it does help you a lot. Like I said, the jumping is a bit awkward, but the graphics are so good, even to today's standards. Like, it can hold up against any other indie pixel 2D game that we have out there, you know? And speaking about the graphics, you can change it to scanline, crisp, or smooth. Smooth makes it look like Like when you take out the sharpness of a picture on the photo editor to make it look washed out in a way, so you don't see any noise, aka the grains on the picture. Then we have scan lines, which imitates CRT's TVs. You know, that's my favorite one, Scanline. Scanline is my favorite one, and I like the imitation of CRTs because I grew up with CRTs, and having some nostalgia of CRTs every now and then is pretty neat, in my opinion. It's the same thing when I played Streets of Rage 4. I also went through the Scanline version because it brings back memories, you know? And I sometimes like to hit myself with nostalgia. In my opinion, and people might complain, people might say I'm wrong, people might say I'm kind of crazy, but if you have never played Super Star Wars, this is based on New Hope, I highly recommend you to play it. But hear me out. I'd rather you play it on the PS4. You're gonna save some trouble. You're gonna save yourself some hassle of, you know, dying too much. Cause on the PS4 version, you just save on some point. You died, load, you're back where you left, where you died. So you can always continue trying. Cause almost all 90s and early 80s and late 80s platforming games, and sometimes some of these 70s platforming games, it's mostly trial and error. It's not like modern games that they have all this neat, well put together tutorials, or you got nice put together guides and whatnot. On 2D pixel games, even on modern 2D pixel games, everything is so you gotta be so precise on the pixel placement of your characters or your movements or your abilities to be able to do the things correctly, you know? And it's a thing that we have to struggle with when it comes to pixel games, whether old school or modern. Like I said, if you want to try this game, play it on the PS4. You're gonna have a better and more streamlined fashion with the game. You won't struggle as much. So that's my opinion on the Super Star Wars on the PS4. You know, it does hold up. It is amazing. And if you've played it before on the original console, obviously, or maybe a ROM or something, you're gonna have some nostalgia out of it, you know? And the good thing is that you can play it on the PS Now. So basically, Game Pass, you just pay PS Now or use the trial, and you can play it. And since the trial is 7 days, you can probably, if you're like a really consistent gamer, you can probably beat this before the trial ends. So go try it, go do your thing, and if you have any chance, let me know in the comments, whether on the Twitch or on my social networks. Make sure to give me your opinions on how do you feel playing this on the PS4, or if it was your first try and go at the Super Star Wars game, how do you feel of playing a really old game on the modern age, you know? So thank you for listening, and thank you for being here. This was the Andrew Van Zar podcast on the Planet X radio station on the Star Wars Hub on the PlayStation 4 version of Super Star Wars. Now that you're listening to Andrew Van Zar, you're now listening with power. I'll catch you on the flip side. May the Force be with you. This was the Andrew Van Zar podcast. If you have any thoughts or any messages that you want to leave me, go check me out on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or my website, www.andrewvanzar.com, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Sayonara. When you listen to Andrew Van Zark, you listen with power. Now you're listening with power. Andrew Van Zark. Stream on every major music platform. Power to the music.